What did you want
Is
to
it
ask?
recorded?
Are you
Yes.
ready?
Okay. Now here I am where he actually, the actual theater where he, where Abraham Lincoln actually died, where he had across from me the theater where he got assassinated.
Yes.
So now here's a lady, we're going to ask you some questions. Now
Yes.
you were mentioning somebody calculus, but
Yes.
when you were referring to Abraham Lincoln?
Yes.
Well, okay, so I got a question for you. I saw the Frederick Douglass with Abraham Lincoln that he met with him
Yes.
2-3 times.
Yes.
Why is it there's no picture or there's no nothing reference to John Brown? Did Abraham Lincoln, my question to you, met John Brown?
No. Abraham Lincoln never met John Brown.
Really?
And did not approve of his actions. Of course, most Northerners didn't. There were some that did, but of
They
course
had some
he
in
broke
common.
the law.
But they had the same goal though.
The order
They,
and the
they
law
did
was
have the same
important.
goal, but they had very different ways of reaching that goal.
Right, law and
thinking
order.
about reaching that goal. Abraham Lincoln's was baby steps. He wanted to plant ideas. He knew that if he proposed emancipating the slaves as a very bold act, that it wouldn't be accepted by most people. He planted seeds. He was a very crafty politician. He gave the idea. He said, I wouldn't be I wouldn't be a slave, I wouldn't be a slave owner, and he was labeled as an abolitionist by people on the right. But he kept saying, no, I don't want equal rights for black people. That's not what I'm saying. I don't want your daughter to marry a black person. That's not what I'm saying. He didn't want to scare people, but he planted that little seed, and step by step he worked up to the Emancipation Proclamation, and he timed the Emancipation Proclamation. He said, it's political, and we have to have a Northern victory by the Army. We have to announce the Emancipation Proclamation when there's good news, when everybody's very up and optimistic, and that's what he did. He did it after Antietam, which technically was a draw, but he says it's good enough. It's good enough victory for me, and that's when he declared the Emancipation Proclamation.
So I got a question for you. The last
Yes.
one is a hard question.
Yes.
Is what John Brown did,
Yes.
was it right or wrong?
It depends on who you're talking to.
Well-
My father, for example. My father was a doctor by profession, but he was also a historian. He loved to read history. And his hero was John Brown. My father's a law-abiding citizen of the United States, but he had a special room upstairs in his house with prints from Harper's Ferry, pictures of John Brown, because my father thought that slavery was the absolute worst thing that ever happened in this country, and that if it took a revolution to change that, then this person's a hero. If you look at it that way, then John Brown was a hero.
But did Abraham Lincoln intended to end slavery, or was as a result of Civil War he had no choice to end slavery?
That's an interesting question. His idea of abolition developed gradually, and he always said that he didn't want to end slavery in the states where it already existed. He didn't want it to be spread into the territories. But once he was president and we were fighting this war, and it did become a war about slavery. It started out about the Union, but it became about slavery. And that's when the Emancipation Proclamation, and then Mr. Lincoln put black men in the Army. And when the war was over, the last speech that Abraham Lincoln ever made, and this was a very radical idea, even at the time, the last speech he ever gave at the White House, he was standing in the window of the White House, there were 2,000 people below, and he said, he was talking about Reconstruction, which is kind of boring, and everybody wanted a victory speech because the war had ended. But he started talking about very dry issues about Reconstruction. And one of the things he mentioned was the right to vote for freed slaves who had fought in the Army and were educated. And one of the people listening to that speech, standing on the White House grounds, was John Wilkes Booth. And when he heard that, he turned to the two people he was with, he said, that means, and he used the N-word, he didn't say Negro, he said something else. He said, that means Negro citizenship, and that's the last speech that he will ever make. You see, that was such a radical thing for him to say.
Yeah.
To propose that.
Yeah,
You see?
I apologize. Yeah.
No,
is
that's
this,
all right.
Is this place where the actual Abraham Lincoln was a hospital? It used to be a hospital, or
No, it was a boarding house. It was a private home that was also a boarding house.
Okay.
Abraham Lincoln was brought over here because the young doctor who examined him across the street didn't think that he would survive an 8-block, 10-minute carriage ride back to the White House, said we have to find a bed. They thought